Oh, you don't have a name tag?
You don't?
That's okay.
No, I had yours. Oh, he has yours. I know I have yours.
I got you.
I didn't forget. Last time I forgot Carolyn, I'm like, I think I got everyone.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to stare at ourselves in video.
Who are you
Recording
endorsing?
purposes.
Our association?
Yeah.
Our association.
Ooh, wow, look how bright I am.
Yeah.
It looks so wide too.
Way too short. Taking 4 days.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. It's 5:59. Today is October the 28th, 2024. I call the meeting of the Cannabis Advisory Panel to order. Bang. Okay, first let's do introductions. We'll start on this side of the room, please.
Sure. Here, just joining you today, I'm Jess Nyworth, a supervisor with the Prevention Health Promotion Team for the Deschutes County Health Services. I've been here before, talking about some of our campaign work that you all fund through grant funds. I have some background in cannabis. Certainly, I was the Retail Marijuana Education Program Manager for Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment during legalization. Then worked for the OLCC doing cannabis and alcohol public health policy analyst before I moved down here to Deschutes County. So we're doing all types of substances of prevention, cannabis being one of them. So I am definitely, if you've got random questions for me, I may be able to answer them, which is kind of unusual for some of these topics. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Jeremy Giffen, Deschutes Basin Water Minister for the Oregon Water Resources Department.
Carolyn Sutton, Water Resources Department Region Manager.
Hunter Dubauer, Oregon Industries.
Gary Bracelet, the advisory board panel member.
Liz Wadachinsky, I'm chair.
Mary Fleischman, yeah, same thing, advisory committee person.
Dr. Andrew Lawson, advisory panel member of Hollywood.
Anthony Ramos, Deschutes County Sheriff's Office and detective with DCIMD.
Dustin Miller, panel member.
Jim Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager for the county, and your staff support for this committee.
And we have a guest over here.
Muriel Panatelli, Bend resident, interested party.
Thank you. And online,
Oh, hi, I'm Ann Lind. I'm a psychiatrist with Deschutes County.
thank you for joining. All right. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of our July meeting. I hope everybody had an opportunity to read them front and back. Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Mary. Do I have a second?
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Any negatives? Okay, perfect. With that, we go on to the presentation.
All right. I don't know if you and Ann to talk to you guys can just take it away of whoever's going first.
Yeah. So Ann and I are both presenting, so I'm gonna go first to talk a little bit about some youth and adult use cannabis trends, and then just do a quick update on the campaign since we're here. And then Ann is gonna talk about what she's seeing in treatment and some of those treatment trends here in the county.
I'm just gonna do a quick check. Ann, can you see the screen, the PowerPoint? And we all know I struggle with this every single day.
Yes, I can. Sorry.
You
got it. You got it.
Thanks.
Figure it out.
That's right. We have faith.
And you can see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. And I'll give you the thing so you can.
Oh, awesome. So I've got my notes up over here just because we're looking at data and I want to make sure I get the details correct. So I may be looking at my screen a little more than usual, but thank you so much for having me. We're going to look at some cannabis use trends, look at the US, Oregon, and then Deschutes County. So starting in looking at the US, this is from the NISDA survey, which is the National Survey of Drug Use and Health. It is most commonly used to compare state to state or region to region. It's data collected by SAMHSA. It's biannual survey, collects and estimates substance use, mental illness, the national, state, and county levels. We use this data set to identify the extent of substance use and mental illness in our communities among different populations, estimate trends over time, and determine need for treatment services. So looking here, the teal line, and it's blurry. The teal line is young adults, so that's adults 18 to 25, and the reddish line is adolescents, aged 12 to 17. The little squiggles and dots around it are the confidence intervals. So do recommend if you are looking at specifically trend data to ask for the confidence intervals because they can be quite wide when you're looking at a smaller population. But essentially it's saying we're 95% sure the use pattern is in this boundary. So these are pretty tight, which is great because we have a large sample size for the US. But as you can see, there's a gap on the right with these two little dots hanging out. NISDA changed their methodology during COVID. Obviously, they were doing face-to-face in-person interviews as their primary methodologies. So they also included web-based interviews. So for that reason, we should not compare because the methodology is different. So we're gonna look forward. We'll move from those little dots onwards, but we can look back from 2019 and back. So what you'll see.
What's that vertical line?
Yeah, that vertical line is the first legalization. So the first legal states of Washington and Colorado, and the first commercial sales started January 1, 2014 in Colorado. So just wanted to put that out there to see if we can look at any pre to post legalization trends, and not much actually.
No, the only thing I would say that I think is a little weird is the age groups. So if I think it would be interesting to see 12 to 21 and then 21 plus.
Agreed.
Because this is seems a little skewed.
Unfortunately, DISA does not collect or display data in that way. So we kind of are stuck with these kind of categories. So when we look at 18 to 25, actually we are seeing pretty similar use patterns. Even from those like 18 to 21 and then 21 to 25, they start to creep up towards the legal use age. But yeah, legal use age would be preferable.
It'd be also cool to see alcohol use.
We're gonna look at that too. Yeah, and if you, I don't have the data here, but yeah, alcohol is still the #1 use substance by youth and adults.
Is there anything that surprised you about this chart?
No, honestly, we know looking at, pre to post legalization, and most states did not see an increase in youth use post legalization. The one state that did was Washington, and then the next year's data came out and it was back to drop to the baseline.
That's right, yeah.
We actually, if you drew this line all the way back into the 80s, we would see much higher use rates than we do see now. For young adults, I mean, there's legal access, and so you would see anytime kind of legality in a community will change, you'll see use patterns change because access does influence use. But we also need to be cautious about interpreting the results because once things are legal, people may feel more comfortable admitting to use where they may not have if it was an illicit substance before.
But also in that age category, I mean, after legalization, it actually didn't jump as much as I thought it would.
Yeah.
It goes to show it didn't change it that much.
Well, and we're also, I do want to know, we're looking at US, so we don't have legal commercial sales across all states, and our laws look dramatically different state to state, but agreed.
Is there any data on how they're being introduced to it?
Oh, adolescents or young adults?
Either of them. Is it families, is it friends, is it? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, once it goes legal, they're legal age, they can buy it, they can make their own decision to buy it. But I guess it'd be more your adolescents, how they're being introduced to it, whether it's friends, family.
Yeah, so the student health survey, which we're gonna look at here, is a survey that tracks with the YRBS, which is Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is a national one. So every state is unique and we have our own surveys because we're special, but the core of it is the same and we just add on additional questions. So across the country, we are asking only 2 questions about cannabis, and then many of our legal states ask additional ones like, where did you access this? And in Oregon and most other states that are asking the same question, we're seeing friends and family primarily. Like they're not purchasing it from a legal place. They're not getting it online predominantly, but they're getting it from friends or family.
Are there any states that 18 is the legal age?
For medical.
For medical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every state is 21 and up that has legal sales and for the commercial, but most of them that have medical are 18 and up. But a pretty quite different medical program state to state. Okay. So let's maybe space bar or the arrow. I was doing, yeah.
Struggle is real.
Okay, I thought you just had to click back in. Yeah, we're good. So now we're looking at Oregon compared to the US. Again, we're looking at NSDA data, so National Survey of Drug Use and Health. We're looking at Oregon compared to the US in our most recent data set from 2021 and 2022. This data represents youth use during the past month, which is an indicator we use for current use. Ages 12 to 17. You'll notice Oregon's in the darker color, which is the highest grouping of current use.
Except for mom, too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a few of us that are in the highest group. And, the western states and particularly Oregon and Washington have always been higher use states for almost all of the substances. So this is not surprising and not unique to cannabis.
Because we have open minds.
Well, it's just interesting that California is not.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
surprised at that.
I was surprised.
Alaska, Hawaii, surprised me too.
Alaska also is a legal use state and Hawaii is not.
Oh, it's not?
Medical, right? Yeah.
So, and then I pulled the numbers here, it's 8.93% of youth are currently using cannabis in Oregon.
8%, 8.9.
8.93%. Yeah, so less than 10.
And
Of
that
all
is 12
to
to
17.
17. Okay, yeah.
That's less than I would have thought.
And there's definitely there's definitely differences among subgroups, among age groups. If we put 12 to 17 all together, we're going to be moderated by the younger adolescents who are not using substances, to the older ones who are more likely to.
Yeah.
So when you start to group them by different age buckets,
Yeah.
you see quite significant differences.
And you think your data is only about 5% off, like hit or miss, it's within a 95% tile.
Well, and that's like I planted you for this one. If you can see, it's a little faint here, but this has Oregon, when you break off into state by state data, you get much wider confidence intervals.
Okay, so that's
So-
like plus or minus
Yeah.
15 or whatever it is.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's pretty wide.
Okay.
Because they have such a large sample size for the US as a whole, they're more confident.
Yeah.
Because they have a smaller for each state, they're less, the confidence interval of we're 95% confident the rate is within this bracket, it's much wider. So we're looking at Oregon's youth cannabis use trend over time compared to the US average. Oregon's the yellow line on top with the little squiggles around it. And the US is the reddish line. So again, be cautious of drawing conclusions because, you know, as you can see, our patterns are consistently higher than the US.
Yeah.
But we were following generally the same pattern to about 2010. And then we made either a large increase or a small increase, but a moderate increase potentially from the US average about 2010.
And this is marijuana use in the past month. That's how the question was asked. Have you used cannabis in the past month?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm from youth ages 12 to 17.
No, but the month before, man, I was getting high every day. Sorry.
It depends on supply, come on now.
So let's take a look at Deschutes County. So here we're looking at Deschutes County in Oregon. And I put this little bitty graph in here because I want it to be representative. These are 11th graders, 8th graders, and 6th graders, and both Deschutes County and Oregon super low in comparison. So 58.8% of Deschutes County 11th graders have never tried cannabis. Well, let's blow it up so we can take a look at it a little closer. But our Deschutes County 11th graders are more likely than their peers in Oregon to use cannabis. And we see this across many substances, actually, which look on the next slide. So Oregon's on top. So that's from the top down, 11th graders, 8th graders, 6th graders. And then Deschutes County, 11th graders, 8th graders, 6th graders. So we're pretty, like 6th and 8th grade is pretty on par with the state. And then 11th grade, we see about 19% of 11th graders have tried cannabis or are currently, that have tried cannabis are currently using as compared to 12% in Oregon. So we see this more pronounced.
Tried and currently using, and what is currently using? Once in a month, huh?
Yeah, used in the past 30 days.
Okay.
We see this more pronounced increase as youth age, obviously, but then as compared to the state, it is a jump. It is a quite significant jump.
That's pretty awesome that the 6th and 8th grade is pretty low.
Yes. We're closer to young adult use patterns at a younger age here in Deschutes County than we would see across the state.
And why is it Deschutes County has a bump in that?
That's a good question.
Lower in the 8th grades, right?
Yeah, lower.
Mm-hmm.
So we're lower than the state. Both of them.
And how were the students surveyed? Was this in person?
It's in school survey.
Written?
Like a written, multiple choice or written.
I think I remember taking one of these.
Yeah.
And they have ways to catch you with,
Yeah.
don't, you answer one way,
Yeah.
and then they'll answer it again, and they have ways of,
I know what I picked on here.
Could we see the survey?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
can you send it to Jen?
Sure. It's very long.
Yeah, my kids were taking it. I'd be very curious to see what it's like, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have county reports and state reports from the Student Health Survey about all the measures, including number of positive youth development measures. So how connected are young people? Do they have somebody to go to for help? How safe do they feel? So there's a lot besides kind of like substance use or nutrition questions.
And that's supplied through the school.
Yeah.
And
Well, this is supplied through OHA, and then the school district has their own data that
Through
they
OHA?
do data.
I'd like to see that too.
Yeah.
There's my thought right coming in. I had a good question there. Never mind.
It'll navigate away, but I'm gonna drive me crazy now.
I was gonna ask, we'll have this deck afterwards. I think you sent it before.
This one? I've never seen this data before.
I can make sure you do that.
The presentation will be included in the official meeting packet
Okay.
that is posted on our I don't know if you all know, we have a Cannabis Advisor Panel website, that all of our materials are listed
So we'll
on.
have access to it.
Yeah, and so I can share both of the presentations along with the survey following once.
Right, I do remember. The parents could opt out of having their, and do you know what percentage of students or parents opted out?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's pretty, I don't have it for the county, but the state is pretty low.
Okay.
Predominantly school districts were opting out.
They didn't even want to participate.
So sisters did not participate this last year. There was a law that was passed that is requiring all school districts to participate. And so we're trying to help them implement. I don't think any school districts in Crook County participated last year either.
Wow.
I'd be curious to see what the difference is in the counties that don't allow any dispensaries. Like, is it harder to get? Is it less or the
Yeah.
numbers lower?
They don't wanna know.
They probably don't want to know.
Yeah, I'd love to see it broke down by school, because maybe that explains the high percent, you know, maybe Summit's just off the rails.
That's the one that I was gonna pick too.
I was kind of thinking maybe the opposite, of like, our regions within Deschutes County that have a lower economic standing. Generally, I feel like families in those communities are less educated, which leads to earlier drinking and earlier use of features, in my experience.
Yeah, I think we see a difference across our school districts in the health curricula, adhering to health standards curricula. We're really fortunate here to Ben Lapine School District has partnered with Deschutes County Health Services to have the Healthy Schools program, which is in every middle and high school, there is a public health specialist who helps ensure that the health education curriculum is to standard and is implemented with highly trained staff who are typically not showing up with their expertise in substance misuse prevention. And so being able to help support them to provide those resources. They also offer a number of suicide prevention programs, mental health support programs, and one of which is Sources of Strength, which is an evidence-based program that not only prevent suicide ideation and attempts, but also early substance use. And it's all about connection and how do you deal with stress? How do you make decisions? And so it's a lot of that social emotional learning that ends up being a really strong preventative factor for young people to determine if they use substances and what risk behaviors occur around that. So driving, doing it at a party, and, with people you don't know, things like that.
I always drove, I didn't trust anybody. Sorry. I still work that.
All right, so let's look at other substances. To your point, sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Hunter,
Hunter. So
Your name
Hunter's point.
tags upside down.
sorry. I have not been binge drinking. We could go, I love the binge drinking era. I mean, there are articles and everything about it.
So looking at other substances, so this again is student health data, student health survey data. We're looking at Oregon in the light blue, Deschutes in the darker blue, and this is the kind of the top substances that are reported by students and adults.
Are they smoking or are they doing Zins?
Both. Smoking is still king.
Cigarettes?
Actual cigarettes?
Yeah. Or excuse me, vaping.
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 Well, yeah, I was gonna ask if that's vaping.
Vaping and then cigarettes and then smokeless.
The vape stuff's scary. That stuff's nasty.
So we're looking at 11th graders here.
This is 11th grade?
This is 11th grade.
Binge drinking and then alcohol. Like it's two separate things.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
come on.
Use of alcohol, so excessive alcohol use is different than binge drinking. So like 5 or more drinks in one occasion versus
Every day.
every day.
Okay, so
Or multiple days.
what's binge?
Binge is 5 or more drinks
Yeah.
in one.
In one sitting?
Yeah, party time.
Is this
Okay.
also in the 30-day period?
This is young people. who have used any of these substances and reported in the past 30 days.
So the alcohol is a consistent consumption of
Yeah.
alcohol throughout the month.
Not necessarily.
Well, yes, it is.
I've used at any point I've used alcohol at any point in the last 30 days could go. I used alcohol every day for the last 30 days, could be in the same category.
Oh,
So binge drinking is particular. So alcohol use period versus binge drinking, which is 5 or more drinks a month.
And those are asked separately and that data is shown here separately. Okay. Okay.
And then tobacco use altogether. And it's broken down when you look at the survey, the
Yeah.
results are broken down into specific categories of types. But just for looking at compared cannabis use to
Yeah.
other substances, and that's pretty typical and has been pretty typical.
yeah.
With the exception of tobacco, we've made really great strides in reducing tobacco use among both adolescents, young adults, and adults.
So there's a reduction in tobacco even though vaping and Zens are so popular.
Yes, vaping is the one that's bringing those numbers right back up. So it's much, much, much lower than it used to be when many young people were smoking cigarettes, but now vaping, since it's been introduced, is starting to inch our numbers back up.
It's easy, it's sweet, it's easy to hide.
It's not as offensive as smoking a cig.
Mhm.
Cig sticks with you.
Yeah, the smell.
Oh,
Yeah.
we had a smoking corner in high school, like the school allowed you to go smoke.
We did
Wow.
too.
Wow.
But now kids just rip vapes all over school
In class.
in class.
Didn't Jules get shut down?
They did, but then they didn't, they just made a case of Juul and then 15 other companies popped up and there's no regulation. But the scary thing as being in the cannabis industry and testing our products and going through real testing and regulation, if you were to test the products that those kids are consuming, you would see some of the nastiest things
Lots of
around.
chemicals.
Yeah, there's no regulation on it.
Mm.
There is some regulation, but the amount of testing that the tobacco vapes are doing compared to the cannabis vapes is wildly different. There's really strong regulations on cannabis in most legal states, including ours.
Which is great.
Yeah.
We want people to have clean products. We don't want bad things. So
What's the dotted black line?
So the dotted black line was to just see where our cannabis lines are.
Oh, I see.
Cannabis
Okay.
use compared to other substances, so we are seeing more alcohol use among adolescents. The same for young adults, and for adults, we're actually seeing the highest, the population that has the most binge drinking is young adults, like college age.
sure.
And once again, Deschutes County is extremely high compared to the rest of the state.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. So, Deschutes beating the state average. One thing to beat the average, but where do we kind of rank among other communities?
Yeah.
And what do you attribute Deschutes outpacing the state? But I
Yeah.
assume there's some coastal towns, some valley towns that may actually outrank us, but on the average, it looks like,
Usually it's Multnomah, like Washington
is it,
and Lynn, yeah.
so it's more urban than rural?
Yeah, and so, Dustin asked the same question, and that's a good question. What we're seeing, I can tell you what the research is saying, and I can tell you how we're seeing that reflected in our communities. So, like the research just says there's a number of different things that happen in a community that leads to early substance use. Sometimes it's access. So the number of bars, the number of liquor stores, breweries, cannabis dispensaries, or cannabis stores, and location to schools, location to places that young people are. Advertising is another that influences use.
With recreation,
Recreation.
yeah, like recreation in general, because we're in a big outdoor recreation things. People are out doing things. They're not necessarily stuck in their houses on video games where they can't vape or whatever. Right?
I mean, that's certainly could be part of it. I mean, a community's culture really can shape how young people grow up. So our Deschutes County's culture, Bend in particular, we have one of the highest number of breweries per capita in the country. And so breweries there's always young people and small children at breweries. There are breweries that sponsor all of our community events.
We sponsor community events too.
Yeah. There's, the detox, retox, go to yoga, grab a beer, go skiing, grab a beer.
I love this good
All right, I'm from Colorado.
What, all
That
the,
sounds awesome.
what, all the festivals, I mean.
Yeah.
And parents are walking around with their beer and the kids are there doing the face paints and everything else.
Yeah, it's a party town, but it's a positive party town, which is something I really like.
We
Yeah. And
drive
so,
down Galveston Avenue on a summer day. And the bikes, weaving down Galveston in between, like it's Sun River.
Yeah.
Go by 10 Barrel and there's people sitting there drinking their beer, talking to their kids on the
Yep.
sidewalk,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll shape our culture, and young people and children are really vulnerable to modeling.
Yeah.
So who do they look up to when they're children? It's their parents and other, adults in their lives. When they get older, it's their peers. And so when we're showing and teaching one another about, what is healthy, what is safe in our community, like we all contribute to that. So again, community norms, community modeling, the environment, access, accessibility, advertising, those are all big players, but also information and education. So having more readily available and accurate health education can really influence a young person's decision about what they choose to use and when. We made a lot of strides on young people are less likely to get in the car with somebody who's been drinking than somebody who's been smoking cannabis. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what is safe behavior for driving, for instance.
Is there any query on counterfeit identification that, like, especially this age group might have access to?
So, officially, there's a lot of different types of investigation. You guys can probably talk about this too, but when I worked at OLCC, we worked with all of the folks who were training and doing minor decoy operations and enforcement. And especially the guy that was here, he has a wall of fake IDs. And they're can be fairly
Pretty good.
significant or sophisticated. So, that is certainly still happening. It happened when I was a kid.
Those machines are
lower
pretty
kids.
good nowadays. The ID checker
Yes.
is like
It's an automatic?
fail safe. Yeah, you stick it into a machine and it takes it in and spits back out. Gives you a red or a green.
Oh,
So when we look at where young people are getting cannabis, it's not really the stores.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
1% to 2% that are saying that's where they're getting it.
my thought is more the alcohol.
The
Shoulder
alcohol,
tap.
Yeah. What's
We,
that?
we used to shoulder tap.
yeah.
Hey, buy me a six pack. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll give you $20 for a six pack. It costs you $12.99.
And so carding, I think there needs to be better training, because alcohol is not sold in one place, like a cannabis store. Alcohol is sold in many different places.
Grocery stores.
Grocery stores too,
Yeah.
people who need to know about so many things,
Right.
not just this one substance. So being able to better check IDs, bars to refuse service, those that have been overserved. When the OLCC does minor decoy operations where they hire adolescents who look their age, under 21, to go try to get buy beer or buy cannabis. And I think it's like 90-something% of the cannabis stores passed, they did not sell to a minor, but it's in the 70s for alcohol.
And why do I get carded and I'm in my 70s? You look like you're 18.
My kids got theirs, they're in their mid-20s now, but before they were 21, they sent away to China, and we got this little statue that came in the mail from China. I go, what's this? It was not really a statue. They broke it, and inside of it was the ID.
No.
And I'm sitting, this is my kids and their teens, and it had the barcode and when you put it against the light, the shine, it was a perfect ID, Oregon ID. I was shocked at how good it was.
And they told you?
Yeah, I kind of caught them, but Well, high school kid gets a statue from China.
Now it's Timu, right? Or
But they
Temu
said
or
that
whatever.
was rampant through the high school. They said everyone just, it's very cheap. You order it, it comes in, and it's perfect.
Wow.
Yeah, they're still playing the game. It's great.
Just in the interest of time, 'cause I know Anne's on.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure we get to her presentation too.
We're having too much fun here.
Okay, I can talk all day. I just wanted to bring up some risks of note. You know, there's, young people using substances goes back as far as we know, right? Young people are primed, our brains are primed, their brains are primed, to want to take risks. And we want young people to take risks. We want them to try out for the school play, to try out for the baseball team, to move out of the house. Like, that's all risk-taking behavior, and we want healthy risks. But they're also, the brains are primed to be awash in the, it's not serotonin, it's the other one. Adrenaline, what's the one?
Dopamine.
Thank you. They are,
Dopamine.
you know, their brains are primed to be awash in dopamine more than adults when they take a risk and get any sort of like positive reaction from that. So when we think about their perceived risk of harm, if they use once or twice a week, we've got 40% of 11th graders perceive that risk of harm using regularly. But then compared to when they use any vape product, actually 71% they share perceived risk of harm.
Tobacco vape.
Tobacco vape. So, and we're also seeing that youth are still preferred to smoke or to vape, even in cannabis is preferred method. With 77 of those that currently use cannabis saying that they smoked it.
77?
So the method of consumption, whether it's vaping or smoking, is of concern because of their lung health. Both tobacco and cannabis smoke have cancer-causing carcinogens in them, in the smoke, but also the consumption into their lungs, especially at a younger age. So also I want to look at, compared to Oregon, of those that have tried cannabis, a little under 8% have tried before age 13, which is concerning because there's a plethora of research indicating that early use before the age of 13 is more closely linked with later substance use disorder.
Pretty young.
We also are seeing 58% of 11th graders say it would be easy to get cannabis compared to my shoes. I got that number wrong. Compared to 8th graders who, a number of them, I think it's like 70% who would say it would not be easy to get cannabis. So just some risks about the use itself, or perceptions. We know that perception of harm, whether it's the norms from their parents, their peers, or what they're kind of internalizing, can really influence how, if they choose to use, how often they choose to use, some of the other risks around using substances. Okay, so super quickly, we've talked about the campaign before, but oh geez, that's annoying. I wanted to talk a little bit, to back up a little bit from the campaign itself and talk more broadly about the work that my team does in prevention and health promotion. It's taken this kind of strategic approach looking at community level change. So the campaign is what you all have given us grant funds to do, but that's one piece of the work we're doing. So access and barriers, physical design, policy and enforcement, those are big, and incentives, disincentives are big policy, environmental change. So that's access, accessibility, all the 4 Ps, right? Product, price, placement, and I can never remember the other one.
Promotion.
Thank you.
That's smart.
And then the bottom 3 that are kind of brown is information, support, and education. This happens more like at a school district, school level, or also one of the examples is our campaign. So information, education. So the Start the Camp Conversation campaign is a way that we have, we reach our communities, predominantly parents, caregivers, and other guardians, to start the conversation with the children in their lives, adolescents in their lives, about the choices they make, how to stay safe, but also, what are your family rules about that, which can be a big preventative and protective factor. So just a quick update between March and September of this year, we reached about 9,000 households in Deschutes County. Our priority audience, so that's parents or caregivers with youth, adolescents in the home. We reached 63% of the audience in Deschutes County so far. The average times viewed, the ad about 11, and then the video completion rate for pre-roll is actually pretty high. That's higher than the industry standard.
What does pre-roll mean?
Like if you see a YouTube video, the little ad that comes up before it. So often it's like.
Oh, skip after 5 seconds.
Right.
I always do skip.
Same. So our ads are like 30 seconds long. You could skip after 15 or 5 seconds.
Oh, wow.
So,
90% watch the whole thing?
Yeah. So I'm sure there's some components in there where there's probably people just not paying attention and not
Right,
seeing
sure.
the ad. But
They're entertaining.
Yeah, they're good.
They're
Yeah.
Compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, good. The English ads are currently in the market, and the Spanish language ads are back in development.
Okay.
And so we direct, the ads are to share brief information and direct you to resources. So the purpose is to direct you to more resources where you can actually make that change and that behavior change in your life. So we direct folks to Shared Future Coalition, which stills from this. In this time span, the website got 6,638 total hits, but I subtracted the website monetization bots here for a total of 5,400 total site visits. We had about 2,200 from TV, direct from our TV ads, about 2,200 from our digital, so social media or a digital ad. So it's pretty even split. 300 from TikTok, just under 700 from the direct Google search, which I thought was very interesting. And then only 71 from Deschutes.org, which is not surprising because it's a county website. So without these PSAs, without these ads, we'd see at most 764 people in the county reach with cannabis and other substance use prevention education for parents. So this is a direct result of the work that you have funded us to do.
That's cool.
Yeah, that makes me feel really happy.
Yeah, that's cool.
Can other counties or districts use your information,
Yeah, absolutely.
or is it like protected?
No, not protected. I mean, we'll have, we want to keep to the same parameters about the behavior change and how we approach the conversation. But absolutely, we're government, so everything we do is openly free and available. And actually, on that note, I've been working with Washington State for opioid overdose prevention and response, and they're letting us use their campaign, and we're just rebranding it and tested it with our audience here. So we do it often.
That was one thing I was gonna say about the numbers. There was no graph concerning any sort of opioid or.
That is because it's not one of the top 5. It's actually really low.
That's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
which is nice to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah. And so, Lynn, oh my God. Oh, I've talked so much. And I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
And talk just a little bit and then turn it over to you, and I just got the answer.
It's our fault. We were asking questions.
Very
It
interactive.
was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it was.
Anytime.
So how much time do I have? Because I have way too many slides probably, but I'll just, can you see, let's see, all right. Use disabled, can you enable participant screen sharing?
That sounds challenging.
Host disabled, so host has to enable participant screen sharing.
I thought
Any
that-
luck?
Many tips.
I
I
think
have
it's
no
in
idea.
more.
See the share screen button? Yeah, click there.
Oh,
Let's see. Yeah, I've got the share screen, but I can't get anything anyways.
Here we go.
Oh, there we go. There's my dog. Okay. Cool. All right. So here we go. Okay, share and this, I'm kind of new to this. Okay, now can you see pretty well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
woo!
Okay,
Little things in life that
so, I mean, I have a lot, but I won't talk about that much because of time, unless you guys want me to, but I can send you the slides, but I'm an addiction psychiatrist that works for the county. And, in terms of, I'm sure you all know, but there's a lot of mental health concerns with cannabis use in vulnerable populations, and those are the ones that we see. So let me just fast forward here and go into, you guys, these slides you've already had. It's the third most commonly used substance. The main thing that Jess talked about is the perception of harm with cannabis use is low. And that is, she showed that. So basically with Deschutes County, we have various clinics, and unfortunately with our medical record system, it's very difficult to get like cannabis use in there, because unless it's a diagnosis, and since we are primary mental health, they have to have primary mental health diagnosis first. So what I did is I polled all the different psychiatrists that work there, and I'm just going to give you the numbers. So basically, whoops, where did that go? Okay. The adult outpatient clinic, that is my clinic. We probably have 500 patients at one time going through that clinic. It's the higher functioning folks with depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD. They have dual diagnosis, substance use disorder, and mental health diagnoses. And they may have psychotic disorders, but they're more stable. Of those patients that we see, 75 to 80% have regularly used cannabis in their lifetime, and 50 to 60% are currently using. And again, this is not data that we've been able to study. So this is when I polled all the therapists, the supervisors, myself, the other nurse practitioners that see patients. This is an estimate. Another clinic we have is Community Support Services and ACT, Assertive Community Services. That's our severe and persistent mentally ill patient population, those who have psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, mood disorder with psychosis. Again, for them, it's about 80% lifetime use and 40 to 50% are currently using. Another is our forensic services team. Those are people who are involved with the court system, usually severe and persistent mental illness. I take care of a large proportion of those. 80 to 90% have regularly used cannabis at some point in their lifetime. And they're not currently using because they have to do random urine drug screens because they're under the court. And then the adolescent clients, this is IDD is intellectually disabled. Non-IDD, there's an 80% lifetime use. 50% of those are currently using. And one of a couple of case reports that the psychiatrist shared with me is that kids with severe IDD, like these are kids that their IQ's like 50 and they can't function, and their parents are giving them high potency cannabis, hoping that's going to help them, but the psychiatrist is not recommending it. Early assessment, this ESA program, that's our Early Assessment and Support Alliance. Those are for young 12 to 27-year-olds, first episode psychosis, 50% lifetime use regularly at some point, 15% currently using. I don't know if you guys, that's basically what I spoke with all the psychiatrists. And what I'd like to just talk about, and tell me if this is too much, is cannabis in the brain. Have you guys had people talk to you about, you all probably know how cannabis affects the brain, but basically just real quickly, there's a lot of cannabinoids. THC and CBD are the ones that are studied for therapeutic applications. THC is most psychoactive, and that's the meds we use for AIDS, chemotherapy, cancer pain, and those are some of the brand names. CBD is not psychoactive, has other mechanisms of action, and it's been used as an anti-inflammatory for childhood seizure disorder, which is called Epidiolex in the US. And then in Canada, they have it's called Sativex. It's like a 1-to-1 THC to CBD that they use for spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis. We know THC percent is increasing. This is from 2019 National Drug Threat Assessment from the Department of Justice. It basically shows in green is the basically the oil cannabis. Orange is the flower, and then the yellow is CBD. So you'll see that it's increased dramatically with vaping or edibles, as well as with the flower, and then CBD really hasn't increased that much. And this is up to 2018 from 1995. Oh, go ahead, you got a question?
Yeah, well, and at the same time, like, back in the 90s, you could get some for cash that probably tested in the 70%, but it's not part of that data.
Yeah, it's not, exactly. Yeah, back in the 70s, that's when I tried it, I did it, yeah. But anyway, part of what we know about the brain is that we do have natural cannabinoids as part of the ECS. It's called the endocannabinoid system in the brain. These receptors, they play a critical role in neural development and cognition. Basically, these are what they do. It's a bunch of cell fate, neuronal migration, signaling pathways, synaptic transmission. And part of this starts in the prenatal period, and it's not complete until early adulthood, age 25 to 26. THC acts on CB1 receptors, which are in that part of the brain, and exogenous use of cannabis during critical brain development can cause the intrinsic cannabinoids to be downregulated, so then we don't get those natural developmental processes. And we're just learning this because they really just found out about these endocannabinoids in the 90s. Yeah, and then here I always like to show a picture of the brain. As you can see, the one on the left shows all the pink is where THC goes into the brain, and on the right is basically various parts of the brain where you have the reward, which is purple. That's the dopamine. That's where we have our mesolimbic dopamine system for anything, food, sex, drugs, and cannabis, high potency THC does affect that. Memory, judgment, as you know, coordination and vision, you get blurred vision and those sorts of things. But as you look at the one on the left, you'll see the frontal lobe is the left side of the brain, and there's a lot of cannabinoid CB1 receptors there. Some of the neurocognitive symptoms with cannabis, you get a dose-dependent cognitive impairment with regular use. Usually resolves with abstinence in adults, but it's uncertain whether that does resolve in adolescents. There's also some new data to support that chronic cannabis use is associated with impaired stress responsivity. And so they're looking at, with this whole scheduling, cannabis is moving it from a 1 to a 3 on the DEA, is to hope that we can start studying these effects of cannabis with dose, where we know the actual dose that people are taking. And the stress responsivity, they are doing research right now looking at it for PTSD, but right now it's not out for prime time. They're still doing the studies. One of the things we know about adolescents who use high potency frequent cannabis have reported deficit in executive functioning. That's their IQ, verbal learning and memory, concentration, ability to focus, their judgment. And again, this is thought to be related to that endocannabinoid system, which gets interrupted by exogenous cannabinoids. Mood and anxiety, quickly, there's lots of studies to support association between cannabis use and new onset mania in bipolar disorder or worsening of manic symptoms in patients with bipolar. The other thing we see, and I see a ton of this, is a lot of people who have panic attacks, and then they're using cannabis every single day, and then they try and stop, and they have worse panic attacks. So that's one of the things, and the ER sees a ton of that. They see a lot of acute anxiety. You can also see withdrawal from cannabis. It can cause increased depression, suicidal ideation, increased anxiety, and insomnia. If you have cannabis use disorder or cannabis use, it could produce some chronic mood changes that you'll see in major depressive disorder. So I see a ton of that in my clinic, and it's always hard. It's sometimes hard to differentiate, like, is it from, like, they have this underlying depression and then they're using cannabis to help them sleep or to help with anxiety, when in reality it's making it worse, because then they go into withdrawal because it's so potent, and then they get more depressed. The other thing, the significant one that I think you all probably know about is the cannabis use effects with psychosis, that there's substantial evidence that chronic cannabis use, especially during early adolescence, is associated with increased risk of psychosis and development of schizophrenia. Earlier onset is associated with a higher potency, age of first use, less than 16 years of age, years of cannabis use, daily cannabis use. And they do share genetic overlap, so they're doing a lot of studies now looking at the actual genome of people who have, because no one just develops schizophrenia. Most everyone who develops schizophrenia has some genetic predisposition. But I do know too that sometimes people, THC high potency, will have psychotic symptoms similar to schizophrenia without mental illness. Most of the time those resolve within, hours to days. And cannabis use disorder, I won't go through the whole diagnosis, but basically it's just, you have cognitive, behavioral, and physiological symptoms that people continue to use the substance in spite of negative consequences as a result of the substance. To meet the criteria, you only have to have 2, but to have the severe, so 2 criteria is just basically abuse. 4 to 6 is moderate, and then 6 or more is severe, which is the old term addiction. The terminology has changed in the DSM-5. And then there's been some recent data to support that 22% of people who use cannabis develop cannabis use disorder. It peaks in adolescence, with both cases becoming evident between 18 and 30 years. And this is what I think Jeff talked about, that youth who use before age 16 are more likely to develop cannabis use disorder. And those substance use problems tend to persist into adulthood. I should stop. Are there any questions so far? I'm kind of going fast, but.
I did have a question on your first couple of slides where you were showing, and I'm going to get the terminology wrong. I apologize in advance, but for some of those individuals with psychotic issues, yes, and the higher rates is, what was the chicken, what was the egg? Were those individuals having these psychoses issues and they began using drugs to try and treat it themselves, or did they start using drugs which then led to treatment?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I can tell you it's the chicken or the egg, which comes first. I can tell you though, like with the people that I have that have a primary psychotic disorder, especially males more than females are likely to develop schizophrenia when they use chronic, high potency cannabis. It's just hard you can't really tell which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but what happens is people will have a genetic predisposition, or they may have one of the things we found too is that when mothers who are pregnant use cannabis, they're adolescents are more likely to develop to use cannabis. And so they have that brain changes that probably took place during their prenatal period that may then make them more susceptible to it. And then the psychosis piece, usually there's a stress. When people develop a psychosis, there's always some sort of stress. So we don't really know which is first, like the cannabis use, or did they have they probably have a genetic predisposition and then had some severe stress in their life. So that we don't know yet, but we're studying it. I mean, this data is all fairly new.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a silly question. I should probably know the answer of. You were talking about the cannabinoid receptors all over the brain and what they may do. Does the body produce any of its own cannabinoids, or do we have those because we've been using since we've been developing as a human? Great question.
So you're asking if we are born with cannabinoid receptors. And we have natural cannabinoid that they just are learning about. They have been since the 90s. And those are what are responsible for a lot of that brain neurodevelopment. So we do have those. They also can help with pain. They can help with other things. And there's a whole this is beyond my expertise, but there's a whole slew of cascade of chemicals and stuff that we have in our brains and our bodies that are natural cannabinoids.
Did she say the consumption of cannabis counteracts? Is what she said though?
So the endocannabinoid receptor system is the largest receptor system in your body. Every mammal has it. We're born with it. Cannabis just so happens uniquely works with the endocannabinoid receptor system very well. What cannabis does is, if you think of your endocannabinoid receptor system as a mobile around a baby, and now if the wind kind of pushes it, it goes unbalanced like this. Cannabis takes your endocannabinoid receptor system, and its goal is to level it out medicinally. So,
But also, oh, go ahead. One of the things too is that if we take in exogenous cannabinoids, just like for instance, if you took steroids, you would block that natural cortisol secretion in your body. And so what happens is when you stop it, then it takes a while for you to get back up to where you were before. So
there's some studies that show that like PTSD patients in veterans hospitals and that they're all low in one certain endocannabinoid. And if you treat it with that cannabinoid that is, Hunter said, balances it out to bring it to level, that it has amazing results for it.
but at the same time,
We have developed, the human body has evolved to use cannabis.
Is there anything else that reacts to those
yeah, totally.
receptors?
And what's unique about the CB, the fact that the endocannabinoid receptor system and the way that cannabis works with the CB1 and CB2 receptors is that the reason nobody's ever overdosed on cannabis is because of that. It doesn't react with the receptors that are in your brainstem, which shut down like an opioid, which shuts down your ability to breathe.
yeah, it does not affect the respiratory drive at all. No.
So that's where all this research is really cool. And this data is really interesting to me because, there is a ton of science and research that needs to be done. And it's sad
And
that
that's
we
why
haven't gotten there.
rescheduling is so important.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all scary at the same time because you're opening a door for pharma, basically just pharma. But there are studies that are coming out that are, debating all these subject matters. And what's cool is that we're seeing a lot of potential with what cannabis can do, not only with, pain and inflammation, but potential cancer treatments and other things that would be game changing. And I think that's why we're still federally illegal. We've been fought and beat down by the pharmaceutical industry and the paper industry for so long.
But I think it's a good thing that they're changing the scheduling so then we can actually study it and have like proper dosing. So that you know exactly what dose how it will affect the brain. And they'll do, rat study. They start, they'll do the rat studies and then they'll do human studies.
There's a research, Dr. Raphael Meshulam, you might enjoy a study. There's a documentary called The Scientist. Israel's federally funded cannabis science and research for quite some time. And the data that they provided is really wild. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, which is great. We need more of that. And I know, anyways, I won't go into more about cannabis use disorder, but the thing we do know is it causes cognitive impairment, poor school and work performance, and psychiatric comorbidity. The problem, and here's another thing where I think the scheduling will be good, is there's no treatment for cannabis use disorder. Like we have Suboxone for opiate use disorder or methadone. And so with the scheduling, like there's meds like Nabilone and Marinol, which you can use for like cancer and stuff like that. I can't prescribe those to people to help them come down off of high potency cannabis. I mean, the only thing that I can give them is I give gabapentin sometimes because that helps with the NMDA system in the brain. But oftentimes when I have people that I'm concerned that their cannabis is affecting their depression and they're suicidal, we just talk about doing a slow taper to get them down from high potency to lower.
I've experienced it personally. I went through the same thing with anxiety. I was having a tough time with the business. My dad was dying of cancer. was having all these anxiety attacks, and I went cold turkey. I stopped smoking weed, and I had the worst panic attack I've ever had in my life. I had to call an ambulance to my house. Well,
Really?
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
so there's a lot of realness to that.
Yeah, there is. I'm sorry you experienced that. That's not fun.
I think it's just pressure of life, and I think cannabis amplifies anything that you are experiencing.
Or you put on the back burner for 20 years?
What's that?
I said, were you shoved to the back burner for 20 years?
Was I?
No, I mean, just in general, you know, you're using for an extended amount of time, you're not coping with that information, you stop using, it's kind of all coming at you.
Oh, like processing wise?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I think to be honest, I don't think I fully processed it yet. It's like 2 years ago.
Anyway, just back more to cannabis use disorder, higher among males, but females, we have a faster progression, as we do with alcohol use disorder. And we sometimes have more, females have more worsening withdrawal symptoms and comorbid mood and anxiety disorder. And then withdrawal, these are the things that you were just talking about. You can get all of these things when you come having withdrawal, and you do even see some of the abdominal pain, sweating, fever, chills, and headache, which this is with the higher potency. Back, you know, in the 70s and 80s, we didn't see much of this in the emergency department. I used to be an ER doc back in the day, but again, these are some of the things that you can see that makes it hard for us in at the county trying to differentiate, does someone have an underlying real mood disorder, or is it a result of a substance, just like we do with alcohol and other substances. So just real quick, the vulnerable populations that I get concerned about are the pregnancy. Basically, there was a study in Colorado that reported close to 70% of cannabis dispensaries recommended products to pregnant women to treat nausea without OB consultation. And that was quite a surprise in Colorado. There is also
You guys was.
The weird thing to think about that says, do not take while pregnant. Like I'm required by.
7.2% of pregnant women have used cannabis compared to 3.4% in 2002. Women are more likely to experience nausea during their pregnancies if they used cannabis before they got pregnant. This was a study that just came out in May of 2024 in the American Journal of Psychiatry. Another thing, they're more likely to use other substances, just as we know, alcohol, tobacco, opioids, and other illicit drugs. Prenatal exposure is associated with adverse outcomes, low birth weight, fetal growth restriction, premature birth, stillbirth, and neurodevelopmental effects that can extend into young adulthood. And that goes back to that endocannabinoid system that is what is theorized. And again, we don't know, they're studying it, is that it may be the natural endocannabinoid system is being shut down by taking in exogenous cannabinoids.
So we have the prenatal, what's that called? In the alcohol, how they can tell is
Fetal alcohol syndrome?
to identify cannabis yet in children. Is that what I'm hearing too?
We don't have that yet. Like we don't have, you know, like fetal alcohol syndrome, they have a wide face and they sometimes have intellectual disabilities. We do not see that yet, but these are some of the things we're seeing: low birth weight, just the fetal growth restrictions, sometimes the neurodevelopmental effects that can be like the problems with executive functioning. But again, we don't have the data because it hasn't been around that long where we could actually study it without, you know, being illegal. So now that it's legal, we can study it more.
Not to mention they're probably also drinking.
Yeah, right.
It can also increase the risk of cannabis hyperemesis syndrome in pregnancy as well. And then adolescent cannabis, Jess talked about that basically it's more potent than it used to be. Youth who use it before 18 years are 4 to 7 times more likely to develop cannabis disorder later in life. There's some data to report that if you use it between the age of 14 to 21, you have a lower high school completion and college graduation, lower income, and then lower levels of relationship and life satisfaction. And then higher rates of depression and suicide, especially among youth. There was a study that after Colorado legalized it, where they looked at the ED visits with people who had been adolescents who had been having suicide attempts, and I forget the percentage was like 85% had cannabis in their urine. Worsening outcomes of later psychotic disorder, we mentioned that. So again, it's something that if like kids before the brain is fully developed at age 25 or 26, especially young males, I tell any of my friends that have kids of that age to just wait till they're 25 because it's better for them. And then this is what I'm saying right here, that the legal age is 21, although brain development goes until age 25 to 26. And I know the American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry has recommended to some states that maybe do you make the legal age 25 for males, but that would be a very difficult thing to do. But we do know that that's when the brain is fully developed. So that was a lot of information. I appreciate you all listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I know my take on things comes from, I have a skewed view because of the patients that I take care of at the county. And I used to, yeah, I mean, I've worked in addiction and psychiatry since the 2000s. I was one of the first prescribers of Suboxone before it was even called Suboxone. So I have a lot of, just been doing it a long time. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any or comments.
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, that was
Really interesting.
a very good presentation. Really informative.
Yeah.
Field our questions, so.
Yeah, we asked them as we were going, so I think we're good.
Okay, good. Well, and I can send the slides if you care to see them, but yeah, I think, oops. Okay.
And if you want to send the slides to me, this is Jen Patterson, and then I'll send, Jess already sent her stuff to me while this meeting, so I'll get that around and I'll send everything out to the group.
Sounds good. All right, great. Well, nice to meet you all. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I had to be home. So have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Then I also sent you one more link. So CDPHE, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, they dedicated some of their cannabis tax funds to not only data collection, but also looking at the literature. So they conduct monthly literature reviews that contribute to the landscape of findings. So I sent a link to that website if anybody's interested in looking at the evidence of public health statements.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just compile all this and send one email out to everybody.
Yeah, sounds great.
So later this week, probably.
Thank you.
Information.
We do have an opportunity for public comments.
Thank you.
Tony, I mean, I know you're included in the group, but I would consider you a public person.
I would just add that a lot of that stuff that you would share with all my 50+ years of working with adolescent, I mean, it's all up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just see the kids, they're just that whole thing with the brain and wait until you're 25.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought that image where the receptors were versus how it affects the brain, that I've never seen anything like that. I want to go back to something that you said during the meeting, which was Big Pharma gets in. If it goes Schedule 3 and Big Pharma gets into it, then your livelihoods potentially could go away. Is that right?
It's the big question.
Would be working president? Will they find this synthetic and not a natural?
That's what I was just wanting to bring.
I mean, they already have that. Yeah. So, you know, I think it's yeah. So Delta 8 is everywhere, right? So you see Delta 8 weed in Texas. There's 3,000 dispensaries in Texas that sell Delta 8.
Jeez.
And that's synthetic?
Even though it's not a legal state, it's technically hemp, but it's really not. It's just weed.
Right.
And so there's this
That's
weird,
like Oregon went to regulate it.
yeah, and there's this weird phenomenon going on throughout the country where there's all these folks making a lot of money selling products across state lines with no real testing or regulatory authority authority whatsoever.
Hmm.
Either
And
Delta 8 or hemp-derived THC.
THCA.
And
Yeah.
Is Delta
then it's
10
available
similar
in
to
the
the-
grocery store,
And gas stations and
and
wherever.
there's no age 21
Oh, my gosh.
limit on it.
It is 10 similar to the 8 also,
What's that?
Delta 10.
Similar to Delta 8? I don't know. I've never tried Delta 8. I've tried, or excuse me, Delta 10. I've tried Delta 8. Delta 8, actually, the gentleman that I referenced, Dr. Raphael Shulam, he did a clinical study with children who have cancer and that were going through chemo and radiation. He used Delta 8 instead of Delta 9. And Delta 8 is non-psychoactive. And what happened is all the kids that were consuming Delta 8 and had the same treatment as the kids who didn't, they could eat and they could hold their food down. And so they were better fit to deal with their treatments than the kids that didn't, right? And they're always throwing up and getting weaker. Not to say that cannabis was like curing their cancer, but it was allowing them to be in a better overall health.
Yeah.
To the group that didn't.
Can you send that link to Jen? Because I'm interested in hearing.
For sure,
reading
it's a
that. Yeah.
phenomenal 55-minute
Oh,
documentary of
Yeah,
him and the work that he's done with Israel.
I'd
Pretty
love to
wild.
watch that.
They actually went pretty deep into a federally funded medical program that looked into this, and it still does, world-renowned research for cannabis.
Yeah.
MAPS is another resource. They're down in California. They've done a ton of research. But, I mean, we're in this weird position where legal businesses can't take part into this all of a sudden national program because we care about our licenses and don't think it's worth it. I mean, there's groups that are doing it, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's completely legal, but
Right.
it's not a good product. It's not tested. It's not safe. It's
Well, that's the problem. If pharma comes in, because I'm sorry, they don't
about it.
have the best history with.
Well, Big Pharma's gonna try to put it into you're gonna have to go to the West Side Pharmacy or to Rite Aid and there's already millions and millions and millions of customers who are used to purchasing their cannabis in a different way.
Well, and we're losing our drugstores. We're losing our pharmacists, you know?
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's not gonna work.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's a little scary. I mean, we'd like to not have to deal with 280E, which is an unfair tax code, but it does open up the opportunity for farmer to come in and spend a bunch of money. And they've done a really good job at fighting the industry for a really long time and making sure they have their ability to do what they want before we get real federal change. If we do get real federal change, it's the next bump for the industry. There was an initial bump, but it's been handicapped for a long time.
Well, you generally don't want something that can cure, something that profits, profits. If we're not sick, then
They don't make money.
exactly.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah.
Someday maybe we can operate like a normal business.
That's the goal. I mean, so, we'd be closer to operating like a normal business, which would be great, but
Right.
there'd be a lot of
That comes
M&A
with-
activity, but,
Yeah.
that'll be interesting.
Until banking and normal taxation and
Right.
everything else.
Right. Right.
Now there's measure.
119.
Is that on the ballot this time? I haven't voted yet.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, if any of you guys deal with do you guys have unions? Yeah, right.
The county has some too.
Yeah,
I'm
so
not union, but
this
there
is,
are.
it's a really wild experiment. So this National Union Group, we fought them last session, we're fighting them again this session. They specifically came after cannabis, and they lost last time because they couldn't find the support, but it's on the ballot, and they worded it really well. But this would be the only industry and the first industry that would be forced to sign a labor and peace agreement to own and operate a license.
What is a labor and peace agreement?
It's basically an agreement that says that the business and it will not interfere with conversations between labor and employees, a labor union and employees.
In your industry?
Yes.
In our
And just
industry.
in your industry?
Just in our
And if
industry.
you don't sign the agreement, you can't get your license.
Yeah.
That's the little catch-all.
Yeah, so it's their first attempt.
Which in federal law, I believe you can't influence your
We don't.
employees anyhow.
Right.
By federal law, right?
What's the benefit?
But now they want to take that a step further and we have to have this agreement that
People who run labor unions
it-
have yachts and
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
It's the
Like
grocery
the guy in
labor
New York.
union and the retail labor.
So they
union
wanna grow their
want more
business.
members.
And if they can get us, because everybody beats up on cannabis first, they can get us to force a sign, and guess what, they're coming after every other industry.
Even though, we have
Over.
280E, so we can't write off, all the deductions a normal company does. We can't have banking, we don't have bankruptcy protection,
No.
we don't have patent protection, we don't have organic trade protection. We can't do any of that stuff, but yet they want to force us
Yeah.
to let labor unions come in, and if we don't have that sign, then we can't renew our license. And oh, by the way, if we're not current on our taxes,
They take our license.
and if your ownership isn't current on their personal taxes,
taxes.
you can't get your license renewed. Now, name one other business in the world,
Childcare.
in the country.
Childcare supposedly has the
Does
taxes
it?
too. But they don't have the personal, they don't have the ownership.
We've been the punching bags of the government for a while.
Okay.
Anyway,
All right.
There's our summer.
Rose you. We really rose you. Okay, so, next meeting isn't, yes,
One more question.
sorry, yeah.
I forgot to circle back to. Earlier in one of the slides, there was a statistic that said 71% of 11th graders receive the risk of harm in vaping. And I don't know, it
Did not perceive a risk of
Did not.
did not.
perceive a risk of harm.
Oh, I thought you said
Okay.
did.
I
Oh,
thought so too.
yeah.
vaping, sorry, of
Vaping,
vaping,
yeah,
yes.
Okay.
and I was like, is
I
that
know it's
all
bad.
vaping?
Yeah, vaping is way higher than
Vaping and
cannabis.
tobacco.
Yeah,
It's-
okay.
It specifically says tobacco in the
Well,
question.
Our
But
principal,
although young people they may not know what's actually in their
Yeah.
vape. Because if you're buying it illicitly, it's not gonna come with your
let's take it in.
nutrition facts.
Yeah. Our principal has a drawer completely full of vapes, and so far this.
Tobacco is
It mixed.
mixed.
I would
And
like to
this
talk to you
year,
because we have a vape disposal project.
this year we've had, plumber come out 3 times to declog the system because they're flushing vape down the toilet.
Yeah.
No.
Does it get caught in there using it?
Oh, wow.
It's insane.
I wanted to talk Andrew because
That's not
because
cool.
it is, tobacco vapes are hazardous waste. And they can explode if the batteries are against one another, so we do have a disposal project.
You got an explosive.
Empty that door now.
Don't move it, don't move it too quick. Don't move it too quick.
Cannabis, it is illegal to have it on school property, so your principal has illegal access.
Oh,
You need to make
no.
a vote now.
That's why I didn't say the school name.
No, every principal.
You learned something new.
You need a
Let's
new
go to a
ad
party.
campaign.
Let's talk about
What's that?
You need a new ad campaign. What's that? You need a new ad campaign for the schools for how to dispose your vape.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Do you need
Wow.
an amnesty
Right.
for a box?
We
Wow.
won't sell boxes.
Yeah, it's insane.
And any other questions, comments, discussion?
I'm proud of that talking about pills and fentanyl, so I'll tell you what, that scares the crap out
I can come back and talk about that.
of me. Yeah. Scares me.
Yeah, that does. All right,
Are we winning?
so go to item number 6.
Or are we
Next
still
meeting?
losing?
January 20th, as I mentioned to Jen earlier, is the college football championship game. I don't know if any of you are football fans, but I know I'm gonna want to watch the game. So if you want to keep it on that date, great. Someone else is gonna have to be chair. Otherwise, we
Well,
thought
Oregon
that,
will be playing in it, right? So.
Oh.
so we thought that January 27th, 1 week later, would be more beneficial to the departments that are gonna come and present to us that time. Good?
Right.
Yeah, 27? Okay.
Yep.
And that's gonna be a long meeting, right?
Yeah, so let's just talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
About if that's what you want to do. Do you have any?
Yeah, go.
Okay, so in the past, we've kind of broken it up of like having a mid-year update in January for those departments who receive cannabis tax revenue dollars. And then April, the budget presentations and decisions. But April is pretty late for our budget cycle.
Yeah.
Our fiscal year starts July 1st, but really we get, by April, they are allocating those dollars and then they vote on them at the beginning of May. So I was thinking we could just do one meeting of mid-year updates, since it's the same, typically the same 4 departments who are requesting, do a mid-year update, budget presentation, and then deliberation from the Cannabis Advisory Panel to provide budget recommendations. If you guys are all up for that, it'll probably be a solid 2-hour meeting though.
Dinner.
And I will bring dinner that time. I didn't do it this time because a lot of people couldn't eat last night, but I will definitely do it next time for a long meeting.
So
That's the 27th.
27th.
January 27th,
Sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Any opposed? No? Okay, yeah,
Great.
good.
Is 2 hours gonna be enough?
It should be, I mean,
My
unless,
presentation will be quite a bit smaller, because a lot of it's the same stuff that.
Yeah.
I think you were very small last time too, wasn't it? We didn't like this now.
No, that was, really just.
Oh, okay.
Dustin just talks too much.
Okay,
Yeah, but 2 hours should be good. I think we'll just have the 4 departments and I can give a time frame. And if you want, we get this for efficiency's sake, have departments do mid-year update and then the budget
Yeah,
request
yeah.
presentation and then just do department updates.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll give them 20 minutes to do all of that, which allows time for you guys to have a discussion at the end.
Perfect.
Great.
Okay, and, but you will put the request out,
To all departments.
Okay.
We may have
maybe someone
a
else will step
random
up.
department asking for money this time.
Okay, okay. Anything else? It is 7:25, meeting is adjourned. Thank you
Excellent.
very much.
Thank you.
Maybe they'll bring the dessert too.
No.
Liz, have you
Good,
looked at
not
you haven't
the
looked at
normal.
your-
My mail?
your ballot?
No, because I